Part 4 of Frontline Perspective, why do I really need to enroll and vote? Right, why do I really need to enrol and vote? So I'll pick up from where I left off in part 2 after digressing in part 3, but I needed to bring those definitions to light, that definition in particular about compulsion and compulsory voting. So just to recap, I finished off the end of part 2 with this section of the Sydney Morning Herald article from 2019. So at the moment we're looking at the historical perspective of this even, what's been happening to us, probably without most of our knowledge. Electoral data. So this is why this data is so important to the government. Electoral data contains the most accurate information on the addresses and identities of Australians. Most accurate information on the addresses and identities of Australians. I wonder what other data they have that they're keeping on us that they don't tell us about here. And is used by Australian Federal Police, Australian Securities and Investments Commission, and the Director of Public Prosecutions to track offenders and suspects. So I'll try and get through this information as quick as I can, and I'll just keep reading. Only comment when I feel it's really necessary. Just follow the info and you'll get what I'm saying. But under legislation changes published in November, Perceptive and its parent company Allion, along with betting agency Fairbet and 3 other companies, including marketing giant Axiom, ACXIOM in capital letters, were also granted access to the data of millions of Australian voters as part of the anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing push. Right, so that took place primarily around the Commonwealth Bank debacle, where it was proved that the banks were being used to launder money for terrorist organisations. But this same legislation has been used now to actually expose and compromise the identity information of millions of Australians to third-party fucking corporations, man. Some of them are overseas entities or have ties or have international connections, right? Also granted access as part of the anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism push. So it wasn't just the legislation, there was a push behind that, and these guys got in on it and got access to your information, to your electoral roll information. Axiom, which says it solves critical use cases for omni-channel people-based marketing, and Fairbet, an online gambling company, have no relationship with Allion or Afterpay. So I'm just scratching my eye, I'm not making hand signals. The Australian Electoral Commission would not comment on whether the use of the data by companies was appropriate, as the anti-terrorism and money laundering legislation was administered by the Attorney General's Department, right? So the Electoral Commission wouldn't make a comment and pass the buck to the Attorney General's Department because they were the ones in the executive that had the job of administering that particular legislation. But now we actually but it doesn't stop there. The Attorney General's Department said Home Affairs. Now there's a department you don't hear a lot about, right? Home Affairs. It's an innocuous sounding name. Home Affairs was responsible for the legislation, right? So it originated with them. They must have been the ones to table it into Parliament, etc., and get the bill passed, blah, blah, blah. But so they are the ones responsible. The legislation originates with them. Home Affairs did not respond to requests for comment. So once again, we're met with a wall of silence. This has been the response of the corporate, corrupt government to every inquiry, even here from mainstream media. They're just going to give them the wall of silence. The people who've tried the legal channels to challenge the corruption within the government of Australia have been met with a deafening wall of silence. The people who've approached the military on behalf of the people of Australia to intercede and help us against the corrupt government in a lawful way, in a peaceful way. That petition has once again met with a wall of silence, and you find the same here, 2019. So when the buck stopped, the communication stopped as well, right? So it's the Department of Home Affairs. That's where a lot of this, and you'll see why the legislation originated with them and how they are actually using the electoral roll as part of the new Trusted Digital Identity Framework digital enslavement system, globalised digital enslavement, identity enslavement, debt enslavement system, right? For what's left of mankind when they get through with you. And then you're going to have to deal with the Lord. Once man stops killing you, which he won't stop doing until the Lord stops him from doing it. But on top of that, you're going to have to deal with the Lord and his judgment on this earth for what they've done or what's going on this earth. What the people of this earth are actually complying with and acquiescing to. Now, that's really interesting. People at the judgment of God, I guess, are going to try and say, why is God doing this to me? I was just doing what the government told me. But we've already accepted that even the International Court, the ICC, has already accepted that is not a legitimate excuse now that you have the indemnity extended not only to in insurance cases, the liability insurance cases no longer just falls to the company or to the manager. It now falls to the actual individual that was involved, even if they were operating under direct orders from a senior official or officer within that company. Yeah. So personal accountability at this point. The freedom movement accepts that. The insurance industry fucking has promoted that. The ICC recognises that, personal accountability. The law in Australia actually recognises that too, because when they mandated the COVID fucking medical intervention as part of a condition of employment, they then transferred the liability for the enactment of that mandate. They transferred the liability for the enactment of that onto the actual employer that was trying to enforce that mandate rather than the government with whom the mandate originated. So they actually, even in their corruption, they acknowledge personal responsibility and accountability, especially for something that's contractual, like a mandate. It operates off contract law. It's contractual. Has to do with acquiescent tacit consent or deliberate non-contract non-compliance. Or even consent, informed consent. But that informed consent has to be legal informed consent in the absence of coercion, with the correct information given, with a person of proper understanding, and also being given that person enough time to do their own research and come to their own conclusion before they consent to the procedure. That's all contained in the Immunisation Handbook, Australian Immunisation Handbook, under informed legal consent. So, to continue, Home Affairs did not respond for comment, no doubt, the wall of silence. Using electoral data for commercial purposes attracts a fine of up to 1,000 penalty points, the equivalent of $210,000. According to the Electoral Commission website, the AEC has strict restrictions on who can access the data, including members of parliament, political parties, approved medical researchers, and public health programs, right? So they're the people that can actually access the data under their strict restrictions. Political parties, members of parliament. So BOSI and Guru will have access to this data if they get in. Alion initially denied it used electoral data and did not respond to requests for comment about what data it did provide to Afterpay. But in a subsequent statement, it said, for customers with anti-money laundering obligations, we may access electoral data to verify identities. There you go, you've got a third party accessing something that should be private within Australian jurisdiction. Because it contains so much private personal information and identity information about people of the Commonwealth of Australia who probably gave that information in confidence, now have that data exposed to third party identity providers who are now exposing it to third party service providers. Fuck. That is what you're seeing is the foreshadowing of what it will be like, what it is like now under the digital identity system for those who are compliant and for those who are going deeper and deeper into the system in order to stay, I suppose, in employment or to stay lucrative, yeah, or to stay connected. Yeah, well, this is what it's going to cost you. This is what it is costing you now, this level of invasion of privacy, surveillance and scrutiny by third-party corporate entities, some of them overseas entities. We do not disclose details of commercial arrangements with our customers, the spokesman said. Afterpay said it did not access data directly. Use the electoral data in its algorithm or for commercial purposes, and it was used as part of external identification processes. So they're still messing with your identity security, man. Alion obtained electoral data is passed on. So this is what they do with it, right? Alion obtained electoral data is passed on to Afterpay and combined with other external databases. Right, so now it's combined with other data, with other external databases, including billing and shipping addresses, debt and credit card information, IP addresses, and phone numbers. Decisions are better made on data and on a real, decisions are made on better data, more of your identity data, and on a real-time basis, said Afterpay economic advisor Craig Emerson. The bank's traditional credit products and even others in the sector either don't have the ability or the inclination to undertake checks of this nature. But this is actually a prototype of the way that the digital identity system and corporations who are either database providers, identity providers, etc., will actually function within the new digital identity, trusted digital identity framework. Right, you need to read that document, the legislation, the regulatory impact statements, the other associated policy statements, right, and get a real idea for yourselves exactly what the government has in store for you. And this is the beginning of it here. Back in 2019, they already had these prototype situations running, right, where you've got third-party identity providers, corporate third-party identity providers with direct access to Australian information who are passing it on to third-party commercial corporations, commercial services corporations. So your information, including the information that's contained on the electoral roll about you, is just going wherever it wants at this point. Using anti-terrorist laws and anti-money laundering laws. So if you don't want the government to have a microscope fair up your ass, and also the megacorps, which are run by the elites, as we understand, to have a microscope fair up your ass, the best thing to do would be to stay away from all this shit, including the electoral roll. The banks, traditional blah, 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 don't, but these guys do have the inclination. Oh, and look at this. So on top of storing your enrolment, electoral roll information in its database, it combines it with other external databases, including billing, shipping addresses, debit and credit card information, IP addresses and phone numbers, and also this. Afterpay also stores and examines the device a user is transacting from to create a device fingerprint for its customers. That's some serious metadata that it's taking off you as well, right? So it's actually taking your phone's unique identification number, and it's also taking its MAC address as well as the IP address, which can be shifting, but its MAC address always, its machine address, always stays the same, and its unique identification number always stays the same. And whatever sensors that they can access inside that phone and the metadata that's collected from those sensors that they're allowed to access, right, through installing, say, the Afterpay app on your phone, you would agree to a whole section on privacy and use of information that it can collect from your phone, which you probably just ticked and capitulated to because you want to use the Afterpay service. So, man, it could be taking a lot more information. Yes, definitely a device fingerprint, man, including if you use fingerprint verification on your device, man, it could have access to that as well. Right, that's definitely a identity identifier that it could use in its very, very, usually that was the best way of identifying someone for many years is by their fingerprint. Contracts are made with a fingerprint, stamp of a fingerprint, or a thumbprint, etc. Fuck, man. And you're just giving that information to them by allowing them this level of access. Afterpay's credit check process was in the spotlight. At a Senate inquiry in Brisbane on Tuesday, both Afterpay and rival Zip offered different visions on government regulations in the buy now, pay later sector, which has exploded across Sydney and Melbourne shopping centres. So that's how all this has come to light, man. It came up in a Senate inquiry, and so they were made to give account. Had that not have happened, none of this would have become public knowledge. And even though it did become public knowledge, who has paid attention to it? Some people have, I guess. Afterpay has already moved into the US market and is now expanding to the UK, so it's an international corporation where it's likely to face tougher regulation. Chief Executive Mick Molnar gives his reasons for promoting his product. They wanted to make it like a traditional credit product, move to compel them to run income and expense checks on customers like banks do, and move away from its own digital formula. But that is a blunt and simple solution to a complex issue, and one that risks stifling innovation. And innovation is the reason that they have given for the digital identity system. The real reason for it is that it will replace the administrative layer. So the people that have got office jobs now who are part of the machine and part of the system, a lot of you people are going to lose your office jobs if they can get this digital identity stuff up and running, and also then link it into the globalised, the globalised quantum-based, AI-based fucking administration layer. Right, where basically all of the jobs that are done by administrators can be handled by quantum AI or AI algorithms. So just the same way the labourers, the labour class, the labour force seeks to lose a lot of its opportunity to work by being replaced with machines and robots, the administrative class, to a certain layer, also faces the same threat of being replaced by AI and automated response processes, which you're already dealing with now. You already got that layer, is very much a part of dealing with any sort of government or corporate entity. Large corporate entity these days, you always get to speak to a machine, right? So they've been conditioning you to speak to machines and to be dealt with by machines for quite a while now. They've been working that very much into human-machine interface. That's why they concentrate on voice print and on visual identification as two of the primary things that they concentrate on, because it allows the machine to interface with the human being in their natural state in a more precise and detailed way. Innovation. You can think of Afterpay as a bludgeoning tool or as a modern-day lay-by. We have never been defined as credit. We never exchange interest. That's because we make the vast majority of our money from retailer fees. Company shares jumped 14% to 16.14 last week, then fell by 1.7% over the course of the hearing to close at 15.23. They have risen by 11.3% in the last year, giving it a market capitalisation of about 3.7 billion. Axiom and Fair Betting were contacted for comment. Right, so I'll stop there at the end of part 4.